Mrs. Pilar Vera Palmes, unlike many of us in this room, your involvement in aviation was not the result of a career choice, but the tragic consequence of an aircraft accident in 2008, the Spanair flight. Since then, you have tirelessly advocated for family victims. You collaborated with ICAO since the early 2010, and you have it and its member states. In 2015, you founded ACVFFI, the Aircraft Victim Families Federation International, and have been its chairwoman since this date. You work in memory of all those who died in air accidents for the safety of aviation users and professionals. uh, to explain us what are the very concrete difficulties and all the ramifications of the difficulties that can happen and that families are still facing today.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. Try to wake everyone up a bit. So thank you to ICAO for giving a voice to this issue in this very important conference in Doha. We would like to thank the government of Qatar for organizing it and for the hospitality here. Thank you so much. We would like to thank the president of the council, Mr. Shakitano, for including assistance to victims among the facilitation priorities. The Air Crash Victims Families Federation International has been working since 2010 in international fora with the aim of giving a voice to the victims, to those who have the responsibility for making decisions in international civil aviation, taking into consideration the experience and the knowledge and giving commitment to handling the suffering and to improve in the future. There have been very important progress in overcoming the situation of the past, and especially the approval of an important ICAO doc in the last assembly, and through the new standards in Annex 9. And this is an annex which is audited through the USAP program. We are engaged in a fight to ensure that we will commemorate the memories of the victims. And we have a celebration every 3 years with a symposium where we encourage states and operators, airlines, insurance companies, media companies, and international organizations, professionals, and victims and families to come together and to find ways to make it possible to provide assistance to the families in a dignified and empathetic manner. In the recent months, we have seen the devastating impact of air accidents, and not only for those people who were on board, but also for their families. There's a lack of structures to assist families, and we need to ensure that no suffering family should have to deal with these problems. And we need to have more ways to communicate regarding the accidents. If a family is a victim, it's not acceptable for assistance to them to be only a secondary idea. And so it shouldn't remain only with operators. This is an obligation for states to protect their citizens. The ICAO's main reference in this area was the symposium, the international symposium that was held in Gran Canaria in Spain. And there were 30 resolutions that were brought to ICAO and a working paper to the 40th Assembly. And some of these recommendations have been implemented, but others are still under study. And some of them will never be brought to life. And one of the important groups in facilitation was working on this in February. But we need to work faster and we can't lose time. The International Victims Families Federation proposes, makes proposals, and I can't take time now to explain all of the proposals. However, one that came after the second Harlem Symposium, and this was to propose and request that the symposium becomes a Category 2 event rather than 4. And we would like to request a report on this with the updated implementation data from in line with document 9998. We need to align the interests of manufacturers, industry, airlines, victims, but there's a big concern when we look at the proliferation of the companies that are dedicated to these issues, but there are major gaps. States must implement document 9998. This is one of the best practices for communication to families, and this is taken care of by the ICAO Secretariat. And so now we have a request, but tomorrow this will be a loud call. We need to be aware and ready. We need to have common requirements and in line with those set out by the Montreal Convention, and we need to develop best practices for insurance. We need to ensure that there is assistance to victims vis-à-vis insurers. We need to have oversight, training, and so that there is knowledge about implementing the document 9998. We need to promote this topic in ICAO events. We are convinced that only the implementation of this policy for assistance to victims will mean that there will be assistance provided to all of the member states on the same basis. Giving more attention to the Federation means that it will be more possible to come together and share the burden and work together. So thanks to the Ministers of Transport for also not giving up. So these are the messages that the Federation would like to transmit to this conference. The members of the International Air Crash Victims Families Federations, they are not a symbol of loss. Instead, they are witnesses to avoidable failures, and they're experts in turning the loss into knowledge. The Federation does not exist in order to lament history, but rather to change its course. And this is where these messages come from. If we lose people again, then we will not be implementing document 9998. Standard 8.47 of Access 9 must be implemented as soon as possible and through the USEP. We need to recognize victim and family assistance as an essential pillar of aviation safety and facilitation in international civil aviation. We need to make sure that we don't have progress just because there are accidents. We need to listen to the families of victims of aviation tragedies. Please listen to the families in their countries. to the victims, and we need to ensure that the real needs are at the center of the response. We need to avoid delays and omissions. Our experience is that we cannot wait to act later. We need to act earlier by anticipating emergency assistance. And now is the time. This conference is another opportunity to face the reality of the victims and their families. A failure to do this will not absolve responsibilities that each of us have. So we come to ICAO to express that anyone could be affected by an accident. But when an accident happens, we have to be ready to manage the disaster and that we get through and do more than simply count how many have perished. We need to have professionals in aviation who respect the fragility of humanity and recognize it. We need to have tools to unite in providing assistance to victims. And this is under document 9998. And so I encourage you to commit to the memory of those who have passed away in air crashes throughout the world, anywhere in the world. And we are not yet united. We need to achieve this common objective. Passion is a sentiment, and the assistance to a family, this needs to be second nature. The people we have lost, they always remain in our hearts. Thank you.
I'm turning to you, Pilar. You, as we've said, you're the voice of the victims, and I would like your reflections, even though we have very short time, on all that has been said today.
Yo tenía previsto.
Well, I had actually planned to close with a few notes that I jotted down, but Richard's statement has caused me some concern because, in fact, we need a review of document 9998. What is the solution? Nobody has implemented it, very few states. Well, is the solution to amend it? Why do that? Because if you're going to amend it, since people haven't signed it, it has minimum requirements only, and why take those away? The second symposium has two issues. Today, the many families, associations, victims all over the world are following what's going on here. At the second symposium, there was a representation there, and those of us who went there, I have spent a very long time on the international scene. I had never spoken in public of the JK 5022 accident, which is what led to this entire struggle. And I spoke on that day as about my feeling as someone affected by that tragedy and the commitment and the condemnation that I have been carrying ever since then. All of the families that spoke during the second symposium did not actually feel comfortable at all because it's very difficult to talk about feelings among people who do not understand the source of your tears, why you are crying, who do not know you, that the feelings that you awaken are simply that they're sorry for you. That's all. Richard has talked about what has been done because the second symposium did not actually have any recommendations or any conclusions. In fact, the only organization that submitted proposals was the International Federation. And then I was going to say that the gaps that exist through which the states have not implemented documents 9998 and 9873 are attributable specifically to the assistance to victims has moved from being the face of aviation, the sad face of aviation, to the proliferation of companies that are dealing with the negotiation of assistance to victims. The states contract them for a determined amount of time. They attend to the emergency and then they disappear. And the families and victims, they are condemned to obscurity because uh, when the media get hold of an accident, then that's fine. But then it's over, and the families are no longer being considered at all, not even by the states. So I would like to ask that these companies, these enterprises that are assisting victims, this is a business. What we do is we're dealing with feelings. For them, it's work. For us, it is a feeling and a very deep commitment. In the first commitment, there were none. Nobody was. And I was very surprised in the second symposium because this means that states are relaxing by handing over to these companies this business. And what I am saying publicly and what I'm asking for is that document 9998 and guide 99 should not be reviewed or advised. Please disseminate it. Help states. These documents are excellent. They are valid and they can and should be implemented. And please, I am asking for this. I am calling for this. I am calling for unity, solidarity. We should all work together because anyone who takes a flight can be the victim of an accident, and you and the international community, you have in your hands this possibility to do something. Do something. It's not very much, but do something. And if everyone does a little bit, then together we will have achieved something. And to have separate assistance plans, there are 193 member states. Believe me, this is division, and we must work together. Please never forget that if you get on an aircraft or if relatives of yours do not arrive at your destination, you have the possibility then of having your sorrow alleviated. Thank you very much.